Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with my January wrap-up. So the first book I finished in 2019 was The Secret Life of Violet Grant by Beatriz Williams. This is the first book in a historical fiction companion series, and we follow two timelines. One of them is in 1964, and we follow Vivian as she gets this mysterious box that seems to have all of these clues to this woman and her family who nobody really knows anything about, and she decides that she's going to figure out like who this woman was and kind of what happened to her. And then we also get a storyline in 1912 where we follow Violet. It's very confusing. Violet and Vivian. We follow Violet in 1912, and she is the woman who Vivian finds out about and who wants to learn more about. So we kind of see her version of the story and what happened with her and her husband and like why she ended up fleeing the country at one point. And Violet was this brilliant scientist who ended up married and then just kind of disappearing after her husband was mysteriously killed. This ended up being a very frustrating reading experience. I did like the writing and I really liked some of the side characters. And this book was definitely very compelling. I really wanted to find out what happened with Violet and like why she left and how her husband ended up dead. And I think this book also had some really great kind of thematic elements about women and how we remember women's history. There's this really great part where Vivian is talking to her love interest and he's kind of helping her research things, and he's like, well, let's go to the encyclopedia and look up your great-great-aunt. And she's like, are you kidding me? Like, she's not going to be in there. She might be a footnote in her husband's entry. And I just thought that was a really great commentary because it's such a small scene, but I feel like it really encapsulates the difficulty of trying to learn about women from the past. And I just thought things like that were really well done. Overall, though, I ended up really not liking this book. And a big part of the reason is because of the ending. I was really, like, I had kind of predicted how it was going to go down, and I was expecting that. Like, it wasn't my favorite thing, but I was like resigned to it, I guess. And then we get to the end and it seems like the author is doing something really brave and really interesting with the ending that I don't really see a lot, and that I had kind of like, it had kind of occurred to me early on. I'm like, I wonder if this is what's going to happen. That would be really cool. And then it looked like she was going to do that. And then at the last second, she didn't. And she like completely ruined the ending by like making it not only super predictable, but just like really badly done. And I know this is super vague because I'm avoiding spoilers, but like this is one of my least favorite endings for a book I think I've ever read. Like, I'm still kind of enraged about it. So I ended up giving The Secret Life of Violet Grant 2 stars. Next, I finished The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine M. Valente. This was a buddy read with my lovely friend Jocelyn from Yogi with the Book. We're both big Valente fans, and I ended up really liking it. I think Jocelyn didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did, and I think part of the reason I did like it so much was because I went in with very low expectations. Even though I really love Catherine M. Valente as an author, I really don't get along well with short story collections overall, and I really don't care about superheroes. So I was kind of like not sure how I was going to feel about this, because this whole collection is about like retelling stories of like female characters in superhero comics. There's this trope called getting fridged, which is basically when a female character only exists to be killed off or raped or like gruesomely tortured, like basically to have terrible things happen to her that often end in her death, only to motivate the main male character. We're seeing all of these women kind of in their own club in kind of this underworld sort of in-between place, and each monologue is sort of a flashback or like a story that the woman is telling about her own past. So we get 6 of them. And the first 2 I really thought were brilliant. I really enjoyed them. The middle 2 I didn't like very much, and then the last 2 were kind of okay. So kind of if you average out the ratings, it feels like overall this was just kind of a mediocre collection, but I ended up giving it 4 stars because I feel like taking the collection as a whole and what it's doing and how well it did it, I think it was really well done, even if a couple of the monologues I didn't really click with the writing style or with the kind of, I don't know, the tone of it as much. And I think you can kind of tell because normally when I read short story collections, I kind of track my ratings for each individual story, and this one I didn't. And I think part of the reason, or the only reason, is because it felt like something that I have to rate as a whole. So overall I give it 4 stars, even if not every story was that good. And another thing I really liked was how each story kind of seems to tackle a different facet of this refrigerated women trope and why it sucks and why it's awful. And the way that we put female characters in these boxes, and by extension we put women in these boxes, I really like how each monologue kind of had a different take on that. I also want to mention that in addition to just the general death and destruction and mayhem of this that you would expect from kind of a collection like this, there are some specific trigger warnings like drug use, and there is an animal death at the very end that kind of comes out of nowhere. So I just want you guys to be aware of that. I will actually link down below kind of a blog post that sort of explains which character in this book is a retelling of which character we know from comics. Because if you're like me and you don't know a lot about comics, it can be interesting. I would recommend reading that after you read this book though, because it does spoil a lot of things in this book. Next, I finished The Ancient Magus Bride, Volume 1, and this is by Kore Yamazaki, and the translation is by Adrienne Beck. Now, this is my first manga. We follow a main character named Chisei, and she gets bought by this kind of creature who's a magician or a sorcerer, and she doesn't really know why he wants her, but she apparently has these really impressive magical powers that she doesn't really know about. She can kind of see otherworldly creatures, and that's really rare, I think. You can probably tell this was a little hard for me to follow. There was definitely a lot of setup and introduction, and I did have to obviously get used to reading manga like right to left, and kind of not just right to left, like that was easy to get used to, but following the order of speech bubbles was something that was a little difficult for me, and that's happened to me even when I read graphic novels that are written Western style, so I think this is just a me problem. I was kind of confused for some of it because there are these random interjections from, I think, the author of the manga, where she's just like throwing in kind of fun little extras, and I got really confused by those for a while. And there were also some places where I think it almost felt like we had skipped something, and I don't think it's because I was reading bubbles out of order. Like, I'm pretty sure it was just how the story was set up. I also want to mention that there is at the very end there's this subplot that kind of comes out of nowhere about a bunch of cats being murdered, and that felt really unnecessary and weird, so just be aware of that. I ended up giving this volume 3 stars. I do plan to continue the series, and I've kind of heard that the first volume is often a very like setup focused story. Next, I finished The Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James, and I actually won this book as part of a giveaway from Literary Gladiators, so thank you so much, guys. And this is a sci-fi story about a girl who she's traveling on a spaceship, and she's the only one left on the ship, and she's obviously very lonely, very isolated, and then she is contacted by this boy on another ship, and she starts sending him messages and getting to know him, and the two of them are also getting really strange messages from Earth about what's going on there. And basically it's this adventure as Romy tries to figure out what's going on. And I liked this. I had heard really, really good things about it, about how like unpredictable it was. I didn't find it that unpredictable, but I do think it was done well for the most part. And I also think that even if you do predict like some of the main story elements, I think you could still enjoy it, because that's what happened to me. I did like Romy. I really liked kind of her connection to fandom culture and how that was really kind of a lifeline for her when she's so lonely. I did read this book like all in one night. Like, I think I started it at like 9 or 10 p.m. and I finished it at like 2 a.m. even though I think I had work the next day. So it's definitely compulsively readable. It's very, very compelling, and I did like it. I think I ended up giving it 3.75 stars, but I do recommend it. Next, I finished one of my favorite books of the month, and that was The Raven and the Reindeer by T. Kingfisher. This is a retelling of The Snow Queen, and I don't think I've ever actually read a retelling of that story. It's quite short, but there is so much packed into this story. I really love her writing as well, and how she balances kind of whimsy and fairy tale feelings with just like real characters. Like, I love how both of her books I've read so far, I feel like you're in the story, you're in this very like folklore setting, but with regular people, and how normal people would experience these wild, fantastical things happening to them. I really like that balance, and there's so much great humor in her books as well. So we follow our main character Gerta, and when her best friend Kay, who she's been in love with for a very long time, gets stolen away by the Snow Queen, she has to kind of go on an adventure to get him back. And along the way, she kind of meets up with different allies, and this is just so lovely and magical and really emotional in ways I wasn't expecting. I have a lot of feelings about reindeer now, and like the like kindness and compassion of animals, and it was just, I mean, I love themes like that, and I think this was done really well in this book. There's also a female-female romance in this novel, and that was just like really, really lovely and beautifully done. And the only reason I didn't give this book 5 stars, I ended up giving it 4.5, was because there's this one part near the middle where we sort of changed setting for a while, and that part really dragged. I think that didn't need to be that long, and it was just kind of weird, and it felt disjointed compared to the rest of the book, but I did really, really love this. I highly recommend it. Next, I finally read The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend, and this was a buddy read with my friend Lori from Lori and Thomas. It was so fun getting to talk about this book with her, and I really enjoyed this. We follow our main character Morrigan Crow, and she's kind of a cursed child, so it's known that when she gets to, I think, her 13th birthday, she will die at midnight, and that's just how it is, and she's always blamed for all the bad things that happen in her town because she is this kind of cursed child. And then on the night she's supposed to die, this man named Jupiter North arrives and sweeps her off to this place called Nevermore, and she has to participate in all these trials in order to earn her place in this magical world. And I did really like this. I think the beginning, it felt like we spent a little too much time in the normal world, but I do understand why, as the book went on, I did understand why we spent so much time there. And I did really love Jupiter North and Morrigan and their friendship, kind of this father-daughter relationship they have. And I've heard a lot of people say that this reminds them of Harry Potter, and like, it gives them the same feeling they get when they read Harry Potter. And I I understand that, but I didn't really feel like that. This book really didn't remind me of Harry Potter at all, except for like a couple of scenes that kind of felt like those cozy, like Gryffindor common room kind of scenes, you know? Magical Trials is something that I always, like, I hear about in a book and I'm never interested. I think it sounds boring, but then I read the book and I love them, so maybe that's like a secret buzzword for me. But I did really, really love the trial aspects. I really loved getting to know some of the side characters. There were a couple of things I didn't love about this book, and that was like mainly how some of the major plot points were handled. I think that Jessica Townsend could have been more creative with them based on how creative she was with other parts of the story. I felt like something was missing from some of it, but I did really enjoy it. I will definitely continue the series, and I gave the Trials of Morrigan Crow 3.75 stars. Next, I finished The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the fourth and final book in the Raven cycle, and I have been buddy reading this with my wonderful friend Huck from Badger Reads. It's been really great talking about the series. There is so much to discuss with all of these books and these characters, and this is like the big finale, so I can't really say too much about it, but I really enjoyed this one. I really love seeing how far the characters have gone, like how much they've grown and changed, and I always love Maggie Stiefvater's writing and this kind of strange and whimsical but also dangerous kind of world she creates, and I just really liked this. I gave it 4.5 stars. I did have a couple of issues with how the resolution was done and kind of certain aspects along the way, but like there are some side characters who I just like really, really love that just totally stole my heart in this book, so that's another thing I love. And I just really love how all of the relationships in this series are so meaningful and so important, and not just the romantic ones, but like the deep and abiding friendship that all of these characters have for each other is just so beautiful to see. And my copy also came with the Opal short story, and I thought that was interesting. It was okay. Like, it wasn't my favorite thing, and I think I read it too soon after finishing the main book, so I was kind of disappointed, but I do think it's worth the read. Next, I finished The Case of the Missing Marquess by Nancy Springer. This is the first book in the Enola Holmes series, and this is I guess it's kind of a retelling of Sherlock Holmes, but not really, because Enola Holmes is Mycroft and Sherlock's little sister, and she is kind of similar to Sherlock in that she's got a very analytical kind of puzzle-solving mind, but she's definitely not a carbon copy of him, and I really enjoyed that. I really liked seeing how she kind of has grown up in an environment that makes her similar but also very, very different from her family. And this is about how her mother goes missing, and she decides that she has to try and figure out these clues that she left behind and get her back, or find out what happened to her mother at least. I really loved Enola's character, and I really liked seeing how she's grown up in this very restrictive time where people don't believe she's capable of doing anything. So it was really interesting seeing how her intelligence and her determination are kind of set back by the way that she's grown up, because she does some things where it's like, that's a dumb decision, like that's so frustrating. But I think it's really realistic because she's been treated in such a way and like kind of restricted from having any kind of like real world experience. So it makes sense that even though she's a brilliant person, sometimes she would make these mistakes, and it's really interesting to see her learn that and to see her grow and change and kind of like get to know more about the world and just become a more confident person. And I did like kind of the like mystery aspect of this as well. Like, they're not really set up as like, oh, can you figure out these puzzles, reader? Like, can you do this? I think it's more about seeing Enola work through them, and they're definitely not like overly complicated. They're mostly like ciphers and things like that. I just really enjoyed them as elements of the story. Like, I cared more about seeing Enola solve them than I did about trying to solve them myself, if that made sense. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I actually read this a really long time ago when I was little, and for some reason I never continued the series, but I definitely plan to now. Although I really don't like these new covers. I think the old ones capture the tone of the series much more, because these are just like, I don't know, they make it look too cute and perky, and it's really not. Next, I finished The Girl of Fire and Thorns by Ray Carson. This is the first book in a fantasy trilogy that is inspired by Spain, and I was actually chosen to read this book by my friend Amy from Blonde and Bookish as part of my like BookTube friends choose my TBR, and she had wanted me to read this because she didn't actually like this book, but the series does get better as it goes on, and she wanted to know kind of what I thought about it. I kind of agree with her assessment. I did not like this book. It took me so long to finish this. So Elise is a princess who has been born with this godstone in her belly button, which basically means she has chosen to do this like great thing for her people. And there are kind of, characters have sort of varying reactions to this. She's like married off to this other kingdom, and it's about her kind of navigating this like court politics thing for the first time, and then a lot of other things happen along the way, people wanting to use her for this power they think she has, and all of this other stuff. Yeah, I really didn't like this. There is so much walking in this book. And you guys know that I don't like travel books as a rule, but I think even if you enjoy journey stories, I'm not sure you would like this because it's literally just walking. Like, there's no, I don't know, there's no like character development really as she walks. I mean, there sort of is, but this whole book, except for like the very beginning and the very end, felt like long stretches of walking through the desert to various destinations, and it was just so frustrating and boring and repetitive. Elisa, the main character, she is plus-sized at the beginning of the book, and because of all this walking she does and sort of other things, she ends up losing a lot of weight, and I don't feel like the representation was done very well, because it's sort of like as soon as she starts losing weight, her problems start getting fixed. And there is the distinction drawn between some characters who liked her when she was overweight and characters who liked her now that she's like thin and conventionally more attractive. So I do think the author kind of was trying to make it look like, oh, it's not about what's on the outside, but some of the book kind of made it feel like it was about what's on the outside. Like there's this one scene that really, really bothered me because of how like insidious it was. At one point, after she's already started losing all this weight, she has a discussion with somebody and she goes to bed and she realizes that she had completely forgotten to eat dinner that day. And the book doesn't say this, but the way that the narration is done, it makes it feel like this is a sign of positive character development that Elisa has forgotten to eat. And I just think that is so harmful and so damaging, and I know it's just like a small part of the book, but those little things really add up and they really make a difference when it's like you don't even realize that the book kind of has this agenda because it's so subtle, and that just like really, really upset me. And I do think Rae Carson, like, she was trying to make it clear at the beginning that Elisa has like an unhealthy relationship with food. It's not just like, oh, food is bad because it makes you gain weight. It was like she would eat when she's not hungry and she's just trying to like get rid of feelings and things like that. So I kind of see what she was trying to do, but it just didn't feel sensitively done, and it actually felt very damaging in places. So I would not recommend this book for fat rep. And then aside from all of that, I just think like I did like the world building, and there are a couple of side characters who I did like and who I liked seeing their development. Like they weren't as kind of one-dimensional as they first appeared, but overall, I just didn't have a good time with this book. I might continue the series because I have heard it gets a lot better, but I just had a lot of issues with it, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. And the final book I finished in January was Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer, and this was a reread for the Artemis Fowl read-along, which I am co-hosting with the lovely Taylor and Giselle. We actually did a live show, which I will also put in the description in case you missed it, but you can see from my tabs, I had a great time rereading this. I really love this series. I really like this time how I was picking up on slightly different things than I think I have in past reads. Like, I really like seeing kind of the hints about Holly's character growth and development, not just Artemis's. Like, that was really fun. And I guess I should tell you what it's about. We follow a young criminal mastermind named Artemis Fowl II. So he decides that he's going to kidnap a fairy and hold them for ransom. And then our other main character is Holly, and she is one of the fairies, and she is the one who ends up getting kidnapped by Artemis. And she is like a police officer, and one of the things I love about this series is the way it blends science fiction and fantasy. I think this would be a great kind of bridge book for people who are looking to get into one or the other. I just really love how dark this series gets. Like, it's not afraid to be really intense, even in this first book, which is not as dark as some of the later ones in the series. There are definitely some really serious things going on, and the book doesn't shy away from that. And Artemis is just such a great character. He's awful. Like, he's a piece of shit in this book, but he doesn't try and pretend he's a good person. Like, I remember Jocelyn was talking about how she really likes that he's not lying to himself about what kind of person he is. Like, he is bothered, and he does think about how far he's willing to go to reach his goals, but he's not like doing all of this and lying to himself that he's doing it like he's doing good things. Like, he knows he's doing bad things. And of course, I really love Holly as well, and I love how even knowing what Artemis's plan is and what is going to happen, because I reread this series many times, it's still so enjoyable to see him come up with this plan and to kind of execute it, and like what happens and how other characters react. Like, it's still such an enjoyable experience even knowing what's going to happen, and I think that's really cool too. And I gave Artemis Fowl 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, everybody, so that was everything I read in January. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books, what you thought of them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!